This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for the Intentionality Gurus with Candace Pollock. And today, our subject, as we continue down this path, is the commitment to candor. And I don't know. I think she's going to have to explain it a little bit better to me. So take it away, Candace.
Well, when I first saw that chapter heading in that commitment, I have to admit it was kind of intimidating. And I call myself Candid Candy because I've lost the ability to edit what comes out of my mouth as I've gotten older. But also, a phrase one of my sisters shared with me years and years ago is, I gave up mind reading a few years ago. So if there's an issue, speak up, let me know, and I want to feel free to speak up, because then we can deal with an issue. But when we have this subterranean stuff going on that nobody's clear about what we're dealing with, it just makes it very difficult to interact at a deeper, more sincere level.
Absolutely.
So this is coming from, this is, I think, commitment 4 of the 15 commitments. And I'm not going to cover them all, but I couldn't resist this one because Martha Beck, one of the people that I have a certification from, had a program a couple of years ago now, and she called it an integrity cleanse. And so the idea was that she was being real clear with herself, not, and possibly with others as she needed to express it to others, about things and relationships that weren't working for her anymore, rather than, making nice. And given the holidays, we can have a lot of those things going on. So maybe the timing of this is appropriate. But the chapter is about one of the 15 commitments, and it's we've already learned about being above the line, meaning open and curious in terms of our approaching any kind of scenario or something that may be foisted on us, and then below the line where we're defensive and we're looking to be right, and it kind of shuts down a communication. And then the 4 ways of being: the to me, which is kind of the victimhood; the by me, which is we take ownership; the for me, the underlying motto is, what can I learn from this? And the through me is, what is trying to be expressed through me, what I'm all about and what I'm doing. So when we come to candor, in essence, we're saying we're committing to express what's true for me, ourself.
Okay.
And it's the truth, and we're not withholding facts, feelings, or things that we're imagining. All right. Now, it doesn't mean we're just going to lay it on people and force our this on them. I mean, there are going to be some standards around it, but the point is being as clear in our own minds what's true for us, and then allowing the others in the equation, if there are any, to be candid and have the ability to express themselves in our, and we will deeply listen to them. So how does that land on you so far?
Well, it's interesting that we're talking about this particular subject today because I started writing a new daily blog, and my new blog is basically about um, being honest with myself. If I don't understand what I'm feeling or thinking,
Mhm.
um, then um, it's very easy for me to make the assumptions that the things around me are causing me problems. And I know that's I know that's not the case. And so I've decided that every morning when I get up, I'm going to write about what it is that I'm thinking about, what I'm feeling. And this all came about because I had a doctor who suggested that for health reasons, no other reason, that losing some weight would be helpful. And when I explained to him what I was eating on a daily basis, he looked at me and he said, well, then I don't know how to help you. Um, because if you're being honest and that's what you eat, then you should be losing weight and your blood studies should be better, and just went on and on. So he suggested that I try this online app, and I went on, and you know, I was going to do it and I was going to do it right. The problem with it is that it took over my life. And after 5 days, I made the decision, I know what to do, but I can't be answering questions every couple hours from an automated coach. And I started thinking about what we talk about here. And it's like those suggestions are what I need for my brain to um, go down a different path if that's what I choose to do. But I have to have those choices. And so I finally made the choice after 5 days. You know what? I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do this my way. And I've actually lost 2 pounds um, since doing it. And I'm not a slave to it. I'm making it part of who I am. It's part of the changes that I want to make. But if I wasn't honest with myself, I would have followed this plan and I probably would have become a raving maniac because I already was halfway there.
In what way was it not working for you?
So every day they give you a list of, um, I think it's like 10 different exercises, and they only take maybe 2, 3 minutes. Okay. But there's a half hour of answering questions, reading something, then answering questions. And it's stuff that most of us know. I mean, should I eat a donut or should I have an apple? Well, I know the apple's better for me. Okay. And I don't have to be reminded about the fiber and all that. But what what I realized was, for some people this may be a good method, but for me, um, I felt like my OCD was out of control. I had to read the next message. I had to answer the questions properly. Um, I had to reevaluate what I was going to be cooking and eating and not eating, and I became so obsessed with everything that um, I wasn't feeling happy. In fact, I was feeling really miserable. And once I stopped it, it was like, you know, I know the better choice if I get hungry is to go grab the apple or have another glass of water. And wow, because I know that and I'm allowing myself to do that a little more freely, um, it's much better for me.
Well, and it sounds like the apps, maybe the intention behind the app is to bring awareness to food choices and those
Right.
things, but you arrived there from an entirely different direction.
Exactly. Exactly. And I told somebody else, about the app and I said, I know this is working for people. And maybe in the long run it would work for me, but then I would have to change, really change, a lot more, not just my eating habits, but, how I interacted with the whole thing. And to me, that was just too overwhelming.
So yeah, your due diligence, your standards to do it properly would continue to get in the way.
Right.
Unless there was some way to do it on a light basis,
Exactly.
sounds like. So you practice candor with yourself.
Yes. And when you do it with yourself, at least I find any of these exercises that we've done here, um, once I feel comfortable with them, I find that I'm taking them into my relationships with other people. Um, and, not being blunt and nasty in telling people exactly what I think about certain things. Um, but I let them know where I'm coming from. So, an example today, my son wanted to bake cookies with me. And we've been talking about it for 3, 4 days. And so this morning when he got up to have breakfast, I said, okay, when do you want to do it? These are the times I can't do it. And we picked a time, we baked them before the podcast today, and it worked out fine. But in the past, I probably wouldn't have been as candid with them. And I probably would have just said, okay, let's go make cookies right now. And then he probably, knowing him, no, I'm not ready to make them now. And it would have become more of an argument rather than just trying to figure out where I'm coming from, what works for me, and then blending that with what worked for him.
So what do you think kept you from being candid before?
Um, because I'm a take charge person.
Yes.
And now that everybody can see my face, yes, I really am a take charge person. Um, and I'm trying to learn to give up some of that. Um, and it's not easy. I've been practicing this, with a lot of pomp and circumstances for 70 years. And now all of a sudden to say, hey, you don't have to do everything. You don't have to be in charge. Um, it feels good to say that, but at the same time, it's not easy to relinquish that.
Yeah, it has risks.
Yeah.
Well, with candor, the idea is it is as much for ourselves as it is, in how we relate to other people. And the way we relate to other people is, as you said, it's not with aggression, and it's certainly not to manipulate or to produce a particular outcome. It has to be based on an agreement, a mutual agreement that, we have permission to be, I call it, be candid, but be kind. Right,
Yep.
and respectful. In other groups to which I belong, they call it respectful pushback if we disagree. But the science shows that when we can be candid, there's more engagement, there's more buy-in, that trite phase and so on. And when we aren't candid, then we are reducing connectedness, whether we're aware of it or not. Connectedness to ourselves, our own truth, and then connectedness to others. So if we're not, connected to ourselves, we're not truthful to ourselves, there can be resentment, all of those, that other stuff that can be brewing there, and so on. And if we're not candid with the other person, then everybody's living a fiction.
Right.
So the idea is that we're not going to hurt anybody's feelings. I mean, their feelings may be hurt, but we're not going into the equation with that in mind. And in business, the idea is if we can be candid, it's actually essential to the success of the business. But since we know that all of the conversations we've been having about conscious leadership means of ourselves, our own lives, as much as any business we may be operating in or owning, it's seeing reality clearly. And why do you think that would be?
Well, number one, if you're not truly aware of what is happening around you, um, you're going to make mistakes that are going to affect you, yourself, but everything that you touch, um, and not to be political, but I'll be political on my end. Um, you know, I've seen that happening over the last 4 years. If you're not seeing what is really needed, what the real issue is, then um, it causes negative energy. And I know I've been through that, a lot during my life. Um, assuming that everybody else around me had it better, getting better grades, had more money, they looked better, everything about everyone else was better. And so my reality was skewed. And because my reality was skewed, um, I didn't, I wasn't working at my potential. I wasn't living at my potential. And once I had to realize that everything around me wasn't so perfect, you know, that okay, work towards it. You don't have to necessarily, you know, get the golden star, but just keep working towards what it is that you want.
Yeah, and when I was growing up, it was very important in my family for us to be proper young women, proper young daughters.
Hmm.
I was the outspoken one, the emperor isn't wearing clothing person. And I was not as appreciated, let's say, by candor at that age for a long time, and maybe even now. I remember years later, my mother said something to me like, "Oh, you sound like a lawyer." And I said, "Well, but Mom, I am. You were proud of me when I graduated from law school." He wasn't always appreciative when I would share some things candidly, and I take responsibility for maybe I was too direct in my sharing. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
So the idea is for a business to be successful, we need candor to have a real reality check. And for our lives, it's the same thing as well, if only for ourselves at a minimum. All right. It certainly helps when we share that candor. But the idea is we can't foist it on people. Unlike some of those so-called reality shows where, they have those big confrontational things, or, what was that show years back with, what's his name, Jerry Springer, and
Oh, yeah.
those types of shows where, some serious confrontational things occurred online without the individual knowing it was going to be presumably sprung on them.
Right.
So if you think of a spectrum, on the left would be the word reveal, and on the right would be the word conceal. The idea is reveal has transparency. There's noticing when judgments are showing up in our minds, we're making assumptions. It comes from a position of a desire to be known, not right, because remember, that's above the line, below the line. Being right is below the line, and being defensive. And revealing creates connection and leaves the door open to learning. All right, with some judgment, obviously,
Sure.
when I use the word judgment, but some discernment about how much to reveal. I certainly have had coworkers that have shared much more than I wish they had shared. It's definitely under the TMI, too much information. And then conceal is in the neighborhood of withholding, withdrawing, and projecting our own thoughts and feelings onto other people, which actually says more about us than it does the other. And I remember a coworker years and years ago, we had a sister company that was on the other side of this connecting door between the two offices. And there was a young secretary that worked there, was just drop dead gorgeous. And there was a young executive with that company. And the secretary of 30 plus years of one of the guys in the law firm that I was working for said that she knew they were having an affair. Right. And I said, well, how would you know that? I mean, it's not like we spent time over in that office. I mean, I don't know how she would have known this, some kind of divine dream or something. But it was sad because she was very much a gossiper and so on. But she was convinced she knew those things. So that's a projection. It said, volumes about her. And that was just one of many times that she did that. So the idea is, again, that the withholding and the withdrawing and the projecting, it reduces the energy for everybody involved. And that means we get disconnected, we're bored, we're disengaged in the business. And that can happen in families and just, interacting with friends as well. So any instances of that you've felt? I know with one of the companies you mentioned that you spoke up about something when you hadn't been doing that before.
Right. So, for our listeners today, I started wearing hearing aids and had to wear them because of an injury that I got during surgery that totally reconstructed my um, my ear canals. And um, I was embarrassed about it because when I first started wearing them, my assumption was everybody is going to connect hearing aids with age and age with inability. And so I held it in for a very long time. Um, and because I struggled so much with it, um, people started noticing there was something going on. And I had a number of coworkers who loved to gossip, and gossip was always done in whispers. And I would say to them, if you want to tell me something, you got to tell me, but please don't whisper. I can't hear you. And then I finally admitted to many of them I was wearing hearing aids. Um, and it was the best thing that I could have done for myself. And I know that now because I realize there's nothing disgraceful with it. In fact, I um, was doing my job plus, and nobody really knew, that I had this, that I was wearing them. But once I told people, um, it sort of went against me. And, um, I started wondering at that time, you know, you know, should I have told? Shouldn't I have? And the company I worked for basically pushed me out the door because they did consider wearing hearing aids a deficit. And it also, uh, you know, to them identified that I was too old to do the job. But I now believe that sharing things like saying to somebody, I'm having trouble hearing you, or um, especially now that we're wearing face masks, there's a lot of times I realize that I can't hear as well because voices are muffled. And I'm not afraid now to tell people very honestly, I know it's not you, it's probably my hearing, but could you please repeat what you were saying? Because it sounds muffled to me behind your mask. So, therefore, not putting it on them, um, and giving them the opportunity to recommunicate with me.
Yeah, so it can become a real barrier unless we do speak up and,
Right.
alter a whole course of interaction, which is an obvious statement, but we don't act as if that's obvious.
Right.
And there's a lot of being polite and not speaking up and saying things. I mean, I definitely was that person, just, uber quiet. And I've mentioned before that I had to take speech classes in kindergarten. I was so quiet. Not that I had a speech impediment. I was just, not at home. I was very chatty at home, but when I would go to school, I was just, ultra shy. And I don't think I ever raised my hand in any classroom, even through law school. But when I became the voice for my clients, then, I can't shut up.
Yeah.
Almost to
That's a good thing. Yeah.
almost to a fault. But the idea is that this one section in this chapter I really love, and they call it speaking unarguably. I just love that phrase. And so the idea is to speak with candor is to reveal, this is a quote, to speak with candor is to reveal what is inarguable with truthfulness, openness, and awareness. So what are your thoughts?
Well, what that's saying to me is that, um, you know, leave the defense mechanism out of the equation. Okay. Um, and so in my case, instead of being defensive, wearing hearing aids and thinking that that was going to go against me, if I had been honest, maybe in the beginning, this is my situation. So I will work to listen to you better. And if you will, just understand that occasionally I may have difficulty, um, there's no accusation, and it's an honest it's honest information that will work for both sides.
Yeah, and so what they suggest is it's the kind of communication that comes from a thought. So we'll say something like, I'm having the thought that we could do a better job about our recruiting efforts. It's a thought, who can dispute or argue against someone having that thought? I mean, they may not agree that we're having difficulty and so on, but they can't say that you're not having the thought if you are having the thought.
Makes sense.
You're not, I'm having the thought that you're not giving us your full attention. It's a way of communicating the person's thought about it. Or to describe it in terms of feeling. I feel, and you have to use feeling words. So these are, they say, the top 5, like sad, angry, joyful, sexual. And the idea is that when we are candid or we're answering candidly, we say, I'm feeling sad or I'm feeling mad or whatever, right? And then finally to say sensations. So to describe candidly our sensations, or I'm feeling my hands clench. I'm feeling annoyed and my hands are clenching, something along those lines. So that is inarguable. The thought, the feeling, or the sensation. And what does that do that we've been talking about forever on this podcast is just noticing, because that candor and that inarguable truth, speaking inarguably, really gets us in touch with whether we're being candid or not with ourselves and with other people. I really like it for that reason.
It's interesting because there are people that I've known who are very candid about something, and then somebody else will say, "Well, how can you feel that way?" Or and that usually gets me upset. Okay, um, because I can't tell somebody else how to feel. But when somebody will say, I'm feeling sad. Well, don't feel sad. Well, don't tell me not to feel sad. Okay. Acknowledge the fact that I feel sad and, you know, give me that opportunity to work through it. But I find as a society, as soon as somebody puts out those feelings, we want to take those feelings and change them or fix them.
Or not be responsible for them or have
Right.
to respond to them.
Right.
So we do not rehearse ahead of time, Karen.
No, we don't.
So this segues perfectly into the last part of the candor topic, and it's called conscious listening. So it's just the second part, and it's the commitment to being the person to whom others can express themselves with candor. Now, my mom, lovely, wonderful person, but she had very fragile feelings. And if you said something to her that hurt her feelings, I remember one time she passed by a door where my younger sister and I were, and we just happened to let out a peal of laughter when she walked by. She thought we were laughing at her. We didn't even know she was there. And so feelings got hurt. She walked down the hall. My younger sister went after her saying, no, we didn't even know you were there. She wouldn't hear of it. And it was really emotionally frightening, that sense of withdrawal and so on, that,
Right.
as we became more adult, we recognized that Marie just, was very insecure. She was a little girl in an adult body. But the point is to be able to allow the other person, she didn't have the capacity, it wasn't hardwired in her, to be able to hear what we expressed without feeling threatened by it. So they talk about conscious listening, and I've taken other courses in listening. I don't always apply it, sometimes consciously and otherwise, purposely. But conscious listening is not diagnosing, not trying to correct something, not to avoid a conflict. So, not being nice for the sake of being nice. You can choose your battles, obviously, or choose, your candor, knowing the price you're going to pay for it, not defending, and not personalizing, or only relating to what the other person is saying to yourself. Like somehow it says something about you. And that last one, was my mom, my poor mom. I feel bad that she was that way. And there's a lot of power in that listening. Another course that I took, once we learned these skills, it meant that you could just hear that emotional message that was being expressed. And I've seen it again and again, how freeing that is for the other person, but also for the listener. Not to, you can just sit there and let them express themselves and not feel attacked by it, even if they're attacking, even if they're using attacking words. We have that choice. So thoughts there.
Well, it so, brings us to home. You talk about your mom in a certain way. My mom was one who always wanted to have an answer for something, and either she fix it, or she could, or she thought she could, almost like wave a magic wand over you so you would fix it yourself. Um, but when this all came out at work and I eventually lost my job there, I went into a terrible state of depression. And at first didn't recognize that's what it was. When I did, I was open about it. I told my family. Um, and we went to visit my mom. And we were sitting in her living room. And it was myself, my brother had come in from California, um, my husband, my son, and a very good friend of mine from elementary school happened to be there. And we're sitting in my mother's living room, and out of the blue, my mother said, "You don't look depressed. Why do you keep telling me you're depressed? There's nothing depressing about this." And the tears just started running down my face. I
Yeah.
mean, as soon as she said it, and I said, "I'm not here to explain myself. Okay. I'm working through it. But that's what depression is all about. Look at the tears coming down my face. You didn't say anything that mean to me, but it felt mean and condemning." And she looked at me and she said, "But I don't get it." She said, "I've never been depressed." And my brother sat there and he goes, "Well, aren't you lucky, Mom?" And he was always starting an argument with her. So he started an argument with her, and it triggered me even more. It was like, let me fight my own battle. But it was from that point on that I finally started talking to my mother about it. And I would send her little snippets about depression and say, "I don't know if you'll ever understand it, but just accept the fact that this is what happens to me." And, you know, I told her I was seeing a therapist. I told her I was on medication. And she kept saying, "Well, can't you just go for a walk?" And that wasn't in my repertoire back then. It is now, but back then it wasn't. And, it was like, she's not going to fix me. And I finally realized this is who she is. She's going to try until the day she passes away. And she did. God bless her. Um, but, you know, y- we can't make other people not feel things. We can be there to support them. And that's what I've learned from all of it.
Yeah, and I had a parallel experience. And when I was studying for the bar exam, I was dating a guy who was a year behind me in law school. And I was in the other room and I said out loud, I'm scared about taking the bar exam. And, it's a 3-day exam,
Right.
piece of essays, and 1 day about multiple choice all day, for 7 hours or something, with like 6 choices. It was just insane. And he heard me say that and he said, "Don't be afraid of taking the bar." And I wanted to do one of those Woody Allen things, like just slap the palm of my hand on my forehead. It's like, oh, I wish I had done it. Like to a 5-year-old. Okay, don't be afraid of the dark.
Right.
If that worked, it's like that Bob Newhart segment of when he played the psychoanalyst or the psychiatrist, and it's just stop it, method of don't feel that. So I think one of the most generous gifts we can give others is candor and conscious listening. And that's why I really loved this chapter. And again, when I first picked up the book, somebody had recommended it to me. It's really meaty, not an easy read in a lot of ways, or at least not for me. But there's been a lot of wisdom in it. So just lastly, just to tie it up, they recommend in the conscious listening, but also in terms of getting in touch, listening to ourselves so that we're candid with ourselves, but also when we're listening to others, to listen from 3 centers. There's the head center, which is we're listening to the actual words, the thoughts, the feelings, and the sensations that the other person is expressing. We're listening from the heart center, which are what are the emotions being expressed. I always say, what's the emotional message they're sending? And either they're doing it directly or indirectly. It might be their tone of voice, their body posture, facial expressions, those kinds of things. And then listening from our gut center, our instinct, and acknowledging on some levels, knowing what that other person is seeking. Like when I was worried about taking the bar exam, I just needed somebody to hear me and let me get out. It's just venting. And when you were talking about depression, you needed your mom to understand that, it wasn't easy to deal with those feelings and so on. You would have if you could have, right?
Absolutely.
So what would be something that would stand out for you that you would carry into the week? And I ask that question of anyone who may be listening. What from the conversation today would stand out to carry forward that might be beneficial to you?
Well, I think it's important that we first are aware of our own feelings, our own sensations that we're going through, so that we can, if we need to, share them with other people. Um, an example might be, you wake up in the morning and you just don't feel pleasant. Um, and maybe you sense you have a headache, maybe you just didn't get enough sleep. Acknowledge that part of it. Don't make excuses, but acknowledge that, and then be able to communicate that with anyone that you are going to interact with, so that your demeanor doesn't come off incorrect. And I try to do that every day. In fact, since I've been running this blog, I have one friend who reads it every morning. And if he sees anything in it that he thinks is a red flag, he calls me and he'll just say, just wanted to make sure that everything's going okay. And I'll always ask him, okay, what was the red flag you thought you saw today? And sometimes he's right. Most of the times he's wrong, which I think is sort of cute. Is like, no, that's not what I meant. But, I'm going to go and I'll go back and read it over and over again. It's like, I don't know where you got that, but that's okay. You're entitled to your own opinion. But it's really helped me open up and, not make excuses and say to people, oh, I'm tired, and just leave it point blank. I'm tired. Why am I tired? I at least have to know that before I use those words.
Yeah, and that can only lead to a deeper connectedness to everybody that you share these things with. So in that spirit, have a wonderful 2021.
Oh, 2021 has to be much better than 2020. And just for our listeners, I want them to know that we are going to be starting your 3rd year of
Oh, come on.
podcasting. Yes, in March.
I have to step up my game. All right.
Well, we will. We have plans
will.
for 2021. So
Yes, we
I
do.
hope everybody will continue to listen. Have a
Well, and
great
thank you
day.
for the opportunity because it really has helped me refine my thinking about a lot of things. And I appreciate the role this has played in that. Thank you.
That's good. Well, have a great day, and we'll
You
talk to you
too.
soon.
All
Bye.
right. Thank you, Karen. Bye-bye.